time. Oh, take this slow. We've got miles behind us, but miles to go. So let's just break this down to the simplest truth. You and I as one will always be better than two.
Welcome to Relaxed and Free, a clinically minded, biblically based counseling podcast. I'm your host, Cary Corley, here with my good friends, Doug Bonebrake and Francis O'Donnell.
What's up, fellas?
How are you, my friends?
All right. Well, doing well. This is going to be an episode continuing or piggybacking on to another episode, which was talking about creating healthy boundaries with dysfunctional parents or dysfunctional relationships with parents. And I just want that to say that out loud so that if the listeners want to connect back to that episode to understand some of the things we might be talking about in this episode, go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
And that was a dysfunctional parents episode that we did previously. So this one will be focused on marriage and how do we handle a dysfunctional relationship with our spouse if there is one present. One of the things we ended on last time with navigating the dysfunctional relationship with a parent was that it's okay to rest. It's okay to take time out and rest and gain some clarity, gain some distance from that dysfunctional relationship with your parent in order to really create a good plan for healthy boundaries, that type of thing. For me, one of the things that just easily segues into creating healthy boundaries with a dysfunctional spouse is that rest is still okay. So if I need rest from my spouse who's dysfunctional, maybe it's mental illness, maybe it's trauma, who knows what it is, okay? It could be a myriad of things. It's still okay for me to seek rest. It's still okay for me to come up to the surface to get some air, to clear my mind, to clear my head, to seek counsel, to seek wisdom through scripture, through friends, through counselors, all of that kind of stuff. But it does look different seeking rest in a marriage relationship versus a parenting relationship, right? Because you're like, if I'm an adult child and I have a dysfunctional parent, I can go back to my apartment or I can go to another. Yeah, I can bounce. Yeah, exactly.
Take a trip someplace.
Yeah. It doesn't work that way in marriage. Like if I bounce every time there's a conflict, I can do some serious damage to trust in the relationship. And if one of those things that is causing dysfunction is a fear of betrayal or a fear of being left alone or that kind of
thing.
Desertion,
probably.
yeah, which happens, right? And people are maybe bringing stuff from their family of origin into the relationship where a parent left or something like that, and then I bounce. I could just be triggering the whole thing off, and I'm not doing any good in terms of creating healthy boundaries with what's going on with them. So we need to talk about that in terms of what it looks like and how it's different. So, Francis, I'll start with you. As we're talking about these marriage relationships, anything come to your mind? You have any experience with couples?
Oh, just a little bit.
Yeah, I bet you got some stories, brother.
I got some stories, but I think you kind of nailed it when you talked about the different types of dysfunction. Now, mental illness goes into a whole different category, probably.
No, I agree. That's a silo unto itself.
Yeah. So which
we can talk about, but
yeah, I'll let you talk about that.
Okay.
But when I think about marriage, think about what marriage is. It's a perfect union, but you have two imperfect people coming together to try to make a perfect union, which is impossible without Christ and the power of His Holy Spirit.
Amen.
And so, when we first enter into marriage, we see everything good about somebody, and sometimes the things that we think are awesome like a very independent person, this or that, very, expressive of emotions, ends up being a thing that drives us crazy later on in marriage, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then we start to see the true dysfunction. So one of the things I would say is if you're listening today and you're single, you need to really get to know each other. Need to understand each other's behavior in light of their past experience or where they come from. Referring back to the other podcast where, normally our dysfunction comes from what we've seen modeled for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be overcome, but you've got to truly understand that. So if you're in a relationship that you feel is dysfunctional, first look at your own stuff.
Yeah.
Because you may be filtering your own stuff on someone else, maybe because, you didn't marry your mama and you thought you married your mama, right? Or your daddy.
Right.
And one thing I would encourage is to understand, so if you are married to a spouse that's depressed,
Mm-hmm.
you need to research what depression looks like
Mm-hmm.
instead of just assuming that you can make them happy. Because if it's clinical depression, you can stand on your head, you can bind things, but they need to be in professional counseling or they need to see their medical doctor because it could be an issue of medication. But to understand what the dysfunction is, I think Cary, I think Doug talked about this idea of desertion, the fear of abandonment. Consider, maybe your spouse came from a single parent family and dad or mom left. And so, understand that their behavior according to their past pain. So, in that idea of rest, I love what you said about the Bible, prayer, and community can be so important. That you don't feel alone, and I would say this: don't put your stuff on the street. Find a couple people that you can have confident conversations with. It's a safe place to share that conversation.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about like luggage or something.
No. That's the old youth pastor.
Yeah.
So, but the idea that that you have a safe place to share.
Yeah.
But make sure it's a counselor, a trusted friend.
Yeah. Don't just tell anybody your business.
No, and don't do it in an accusatory way that we're trying to fix our spouse.
Correct.
'Cause,
Which goes back to creating. How do then we create a healthy boundary? So one of the things you just mentioned, Francis, was don't be accusatory. But I want to check in with our scientists.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's up?
Yeah. I want to see so of the things that I've said, of the things that Doug said,
Francis.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, Francis.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You're good.
We look alike, don't we?
We do. Yeah. Same age.
do not-
everything.
You're looking very
Like,
you're looking very Asian tonight.
I am. Yeah.
I am
For our listeners who do not know, Francis is half Japanese.
Right.
So,
and the later it gets, the more Japanese I look.
Yeah. Well, me too. So maybe that's where the resemblance is happening.
Yes.
So what, from a scientific, so from a scientific perspective, I think, I don't have any data on any of this as far as stats, but I think just to add another analogy to the mix, going back to something like clinical depression, but if there's any of these underlying issues or even, having your childhood, have your parents, desert you randomly, right? Which I think is common in like alcoholic tendencies or alcoholics, right? They'll just desert.
Yeah.
And you don't know why, and you think it's because of you, and you internalize it and all this stuff. And so if that,
well, even kids on a subconscious level can come to believe that and not even realize they believe it, if that makes sense.
yeah, like they think that they're the ones causing them to leave sporadically.
Because children psychologically are very egocentric.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sorry, go ahead.
That's Freud.
That's
right?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Look at me. It's all because I went to his apartment in Vienna. So I guess just tying all that back, it is important to remember that there's so many psychological and biological factors tying into both sides of this perfect union, which is what makes us imperfect. And that in the same way that someone getting a chronic illness, right? Or in a car accident or something, right? That is not because of the spouse's actions or inactions.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
This is beyond that.
Yeah.
And so it's important to remember that, because thinking that you caused those things to happen is just as absurd as thinking you caused their depression or whatever. If it is, not acute but chronic,
Yeah.
right?
Or
It's
even
biologically.
thinking that you can be the savior of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Because
different
sometimes they
personalities.
need physical therapy, right?
Yeah.
And they need drugs or
Right.
yeah,
Well, how many
interventions.
people have entered into marriage thinking that they could fix somebody?
A lot.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot.
I don't know. I haven't been a marriage Is it a lot?
It's a lot.
Oh,
It's a lot, Doug.
Do
It's
they
a lot.
do they consciously know?
It's not all the time.
Okay.
No.
Because I don't think,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back now, which is when my eyes have gone glassy. I'm trying to think back if either I or Lindsay entered thinking that. She probably entered thinking she was going to change me. I would bet.
Well, if she is a 1 on the Enneagram, she is going to enter any relationship thinking about how she can bring peace and
okay.
improvement to it. So,
Boy, that's why she's so frustrated with me all the time. Because then once somebody tries to fix me, I will deliberately not allow myself to be fixed.
yeah.
Because don't try to impose your will on me.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a whole nother session
I
for
know.
the podcast.
It is.
So I do want to go back to the setting a boundary with a dysfunctional or unhealthy spouse, and tie it back to a Bible verse chosen by our pastor in residence, Francis O'Donnell, which was Colossians 3:12 through 14. Yeah, and I am, for those of you out there who do not like Eugene Peterson, I'm sorry, but I do like him. And
So get over it.
yeah, so get over it.
Deal
In the
with it.
message, so we're going to be reading from the message, Colossians 3:12 through 14. So, chosen by God for this new life of love, dress in the wardrobe God picked out for you, which is compassion, kindness, humility, quiet strength, and discipline. Be even-tempered, content with second place, quick to forgive an offense, forgive as quickly and completely as the Master forgave you. And regardless of what else you put on, wear love. It's your basic all-purpose garment. Never be without it. And so I love that, because when we're focusing on building healthy boundaries with a spouse, there's really no better garment than love.
That's right.
And that sounds kind of cliche. I mean, I guess it is cliche. Doesn't sound like it is a cliche, like wear love, but
I think it predates most cliches, right? It's,
oh, I like that. Yes, it does predate cliches.
Yeah.
Take that, cliche.
so I'll use it unabashedly.
Because all I need is love.
All you need is love.
You should patent that. Copyright it.
I
All
think I
right.
will.
So
Yeah. So so we siloed mental illness over here to my left.
mhm.
And then we'll talk about, let's talk about trauma and family of origin issues. And when I say family of origin, what I mean is the family that you grew up in. So that modeling that Francis mentioned earlier is going to play a huge role in how you resolve conflicts in your marriage, right? The way you learned to relate was your family of origin. It doesn't matter if that was your biological family or adoptive family or whatever. That is how you learned how to resolve conflict. It was modeled for you. So the way that your parents modeled conflict for you had an impact.
So is this why they say it's important to not hide conflict from your kids, but allow the conflict to be there if there's conflict there, but show the resolution?
Right, in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously
yeah.
you don't go pick the fight just to show it. But
well, but that's funny because my wife used to accuse me, because I grew up in a family that was very vocal and demonstrative, and the loudest person won the argument.
yeah.
And so my wife, when we first got married, would say to me, "You're just picking a fight to fight," and
Yeah.
and that's just how we did it, and how I grew up.
And you're like, yeah.
Yeah, and what was funny is to be called on it. because we never called on it before. Everyone participated.
Sure.
Right.
So
It's just what you did.
So healthy people who set a healthy boundary says, I'm not going to fight for the sake of fighting. What are you upset about? Asking the root questions. Why are you behaving this way? I just a funny story. One time, one of my daughters said to me, she was describing our family to a friend, and she said, there's dad's side crazy, and there's mom's side crazy.
That's good.
I love that.
And so because on we put the dis in dysfunction growing up. My wife came from a very strong Christian family. I didn't come from a Christian family, but to learn and to watch her family relate was really important. And I think that's where if you have healthy parents, it's in. For me, you see that and you want to model that. You want that good example. That Scripture teaches us, your mother and your father may forsake you, but your Lord, your God will never leave you. And so, understand that even in the midst of that frustration with your spouse, God never leaves you.
Amen. Yeah, which can answer so many of those deep-seated fears that we might have picked up along the way in our family of origin, right? Because some of the top fears that cause marriage discord are fear of betrayal, fear of being left alone, right?
Yeah.
Those are two big ones. That lead to an escalation or a tension, and sometimes around what may seem like very simple subjects, like where do you want to go to dinner? And all of a sudden, everyone triggers into an argument, and then they're like confused, like, how did me asking you where you wanted to eat dinner end in this? Like,
how did this explode?
How did this get that way? And the reality is, and obviously I'm oversimplifying it because that's what I do, but the reality is like 80%, right?
That's
this is going to apply to 80% of people out there.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit the 80%. The reality is that if I've got trauma, or I came from a dysfunctional family, then it's very likely that something's being triggered in me in that moment, that question is asked that I might not even be aware of. And my emotional response of anger or fear or whatever it is going to tank that conversation really quickly. Doug, have you followed the Gottmans at all? Like, because they're scientists.
I don't think I have.
Have you ever heard of the 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work by John and Julie Gottman?
Oh, I think we may have read it actually.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
But boy, if we did, it was a while
So what
ago.
I love about them is they are very data driven. And so you would probably love that as well.
Was that the one that had them in the chairs?
The love map.
And then they could predict whether or not they were getting divorced?
Yes.
Based on the ones who would diffuse?
Yes. Based on...
Look at that.
Yeah, based on whether or not they saw these 7 principles.
Yeah.
They could predict, scientifically that
they could
this couple would.
There were like probability numbers that they could go through.
Yeah, exactly. Because basically what they did, and they created a love lab in downtown Seattle, and they watched couples fought. They would watch couples fight, and they would just collect data.
Yep.
Collect. Big old volume, and then they condensed it down into 7 principles for those of us who don't like reading volumes and volumes of data, right? And
it was a great book. I did like that book.
It is, and it's what's really cool about it is the practical exercises that come out of that. At Lakewood Family, we use a lot of the Gottman material, and so I say all that to say. They are great at teaching communication. So how do I diffuse a situation? How do I communicate? How do I use practical communication tools and coach my clients to do the same? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good things that really stick with you from that book. and I'm bad with titles and things, but when you give me the practical, I know exactly what you're talking about. Lindsay and I still use this constantly, and the main one is the diffusion. That's why it was the first to come to my mind and all that stuff, because if we do have a conflict, if we do have a fight, one of us makes sure to diffuse by the end of it, to show, hey, we're still in this together, type of a thing.
Yeah, the repair.
Yeah, the repair.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think I should probably just give a quick explanation of that.
Yeah. Yes.
You have a long fight or whatever, a argument, a disagreement, and one or both find something that basically interjects either laughter or something to diffuse so that it's not ending on a conflict and it doesn't just stay a conflict. And so we kind of have a practice of that, and you turn to inside jokes or something like that. And we just rotate through. So yeah, that is a good book. I do like that.
Wonderful. So, and I want to add,
Sure.
So we have the point of, that our trauma in our dysfunctional family plays into modeling, and it plays into, dysfunctional relationships in marriage. And this next point, I cannot stress enough. Do not go it alone. Because the way that you learned, or the way that your spouse learned how to do conflict, is so deeply ingrained in them. You are not going to solve that problem, just the two of you. Go to marriage counseling. And I will repeat that again.
Yeah.
It is not a shameful thing to go to marriage counseling. On average, couples go to marriage counseling 6 years too late.
Dang.
6 years too late. That is why we have the divorce rates we do in this country. All right. If you knew how to do it, you're a smart person. Okay. I'm talking to you listeners. If you knew how to do it, you'd be doing it.
Mm-hmm. It'd be fixed already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't. And that's okay. We have more quality marriage counselors available in this country right now than we've ever had.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's like you listener. I'm talking to you. You probably also don't know how to do open heart surgery.
Right.
And there are people who have trained their whole lives to do that and dedicated their lives to do that. Like, you don't try and do that yourself. So I can see that.
Yeah.
So, Cary, what would you say? So I know on my car, it tells me it's time to change the oil. There's a warning light that comes on. So give us like maybe 4 or 5 examples of when it's time.
When it's time. When there is a perpetual conflict that you think or feel is draining the life from your relationship. Okay.
Like a topic of conflict. Like you never do the dishes.
So that
or a pattern of behavior, I guess.
It'd be a pattern,
Okay.
right? So in like you never do the dishes could definitely be a part of it, right?
That's probably more a symptom than a...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, and you start to put together of like, he or she never does the dishes.
Yep.
And then it's like, you know what? They don't do anything around here. Like, why am I doing all the stuff and they're not doing anything? That would be a perpetual conflict of like, you keep coming back to feeling that way. And then it begins to erode your trust in your spouse, and it begins to erode the positive, feel good, positive beliefs about who they are and why they're in the marriage. When you feel yourself shifting from a positive perspective into a consistent negative perspective, or what the Gottmans would call a negative sentiment override about your spouse, it's time to come in.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Did they go through how that erodes the trust? That's just an interesting mechanism I hadn't thought of before.
Did the Gottmans go through how?
Or can you just explain briefly. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't need a dissertation. So I'm sure you could talk a lot about it.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll even go back to the conversation that you and I and Francis were having before this, right?
Right.
We were talking about planning for this particular podcast, and Doug was saying some things that I was not understanding, and he was not feeling heard. He wasn't feeling understood. Well, that's going to impact his trust in me, right? If he does not feel understood and he does not feel heard, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well, moving on. Like, I can't explain myself any better, and you're clearly not getting it.
Right.
So then that's going to feel like a betrayal to Doug. It's going to feel like I don't care about him. It's going to feel like I'm not slowing down to even consider or reflect what he's thinking or what he's feeling. Like, that's a problem. And that's how it is connected back to trust. Because when we get married, our belief and our hope is that come hell or high water, this person's got my back.
Yeah.
But if I'm trying to explain my feelings or I'm trying to explain how I'm thinking about something and they're not caring to slow down or listen or really empathize with me in that moment, that's a betrayal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great example.
Yeah.
I was hoping that wouldn't come up on the podcast.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, you're good. Thanks.
Friends is like moving on.
Yep.
No, I'm just thinking about, in that situation, healthy couples learn to celebrate the differences and they learn to play off the differences.
Yes.
And they use that past dysfunction to learn and not to bring that into their marriage. But couples that don't talk, they will never understand what the dysfunction is, what the why behind the behavior is. And that's
correct.
And if you don't have that clear communication, and then they never deal with the issue, they always attack each other, which destroys the relationship.
Well, and then if they've got trauma, or and what we're talking about in this episode is a dysfunctional relationship. So there's trauma.
That's what we're that's what we're addressing.
There's trauma and there's dysfunctional family of origin stuff going on. Like, I guarantee it. So when we're talking about that, if my spouse is being triggered, we're not going to have a good communication.
Nope.
And I learned this, and that is really where Gottman will fall short, because Gottman is great with their exercises in teaching and coaching good communication techniques. That's bar none. Use it all the time. But if you've got someone who's got trauma, or if you've got someone who has severe family dysfunction that they're coming from, and they're triggered in that moment, their brain is shut down. They're not going to communicate well. You have got to find a way to calm them down so that they can begin to communicate.
Yeah, that's what you said in one of our episodes. I think you talked about getting them, or maybe Misty did actually. I think you did. I was asking about Misty and that process, and that the first thing you establish is safety.
Yes.
Yeah. So because you have to provide that safe space, right? I'm just quoting your words back to you. I think
you do. Yeah.
But,
no, you absolutely do.
So that kind of leads me back to a question I had on the first point, which was creating that space, right? To be able to go and kind of be free for a minute.
Yeah. So part of creating a healthy
yourself.
boundary with a dysfunctional spouse is creating a safe space.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what is it? And obviously there's a whole bunch of caveats, right? But when is that creating space versus escaping?
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah. That's a great question.
Like, is it measured in hours, days versus weeks, months?
Yeah.
And I know there's no clear rule, but I mean, I feel like there's got to be at least some guidelines, maybe.
There are guidelines.
I don't know.
And just like Francis got some answers too, but
you go ahead.
So, I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
So there are guidelines. And one of those guidelines is, and I talked about this in the blog with creating boundaries with unhealthy parents, is that a healthy individual wants other individuals to be healthy. So a healthy husband or healthy spouse who has their spouse say to them, I need some space to think about this. Even though that may hurt, really, really bad, and that may trigger my own fears of abandonment or fears of rejection or whatever those fears are, I still love my spouse enough to say like, okay, babe, I understand that hurts a lot. What do you need from me? Right? And that's the healthy response. There's all kinds of unhealthy responses to that.
Yeah.
And I kind of don't even want to go down that rabbit hole because the healthy response is, okay, that hurts. I feel sad about that, or I feel frustrated about that, whatever the feeling is. However, I love you and I want what's best for you. And how can I help?
Okay.
Yeah. We're in this together.
We're in this together. That's a great one.
We're in this together. I think creating that space also is there's always a plan to return.
Yes.
And we're not talking days and months. We may be talking about a couple hours to clear your head, or, I'm going to go play golf.
Sure.
You know, I'm going to go fishing.
Sure.
Because what happens is sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves, and then our default mechanism is we usually do things that aren't really healthy.
Right.
You know, so to cope with the tension in the marriage or the dysfunction, we're going to do things. We're going to maybe overwatch TV, overeat. Pornography is a big deal for guys and women now. I mean, statistics say men and women both
it's
are
increasing for women as well
too.
Yeah.
And so, make sure it's a healthy coping mechanism, and you're not escaping, you're retreating.
Right.
And then with a plan to return after you refuel.
Yeah.
Because in the midst of that, you got to get that space, or you're not going to be able to communicate clearly.
Yeah. And I just love the language of, I'm not running from you. I'm running to a healthier version of us.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah. I'm not running from us. I'm getting some space so I can think clearly, so I can think better about us.
Yeah. Recollecting.
Yeah.
Well, Cary, what happens if, because a lot of time, going back to the rules of dysfunction, don't trust, don't talk, don't feel, that the spouse that's dealing with the trauma or the dysfunction doesn't want to go to counseling. How would you coach the maybe the healthier partner in helping that person understand that?
Yeah. So, the healthy spouse who wants counseling, and so we'll say like the unhealthy spouse doesn't go to counseling. Statistically, I will be frank with everyone. I think Doug will appreciate this as a data person.
Mm-hmm.
Statistically, if you go to counseling and your spouse, and it's for marriage stuff, and your spouse does not, that increases the likelihood of separation. So I counsel my couples all the time of like, hey, I know you, especially if one of them doesn't want to be there, I will talk directly to that person in a phone consult or whatever and say like, hey, listen, she's clear, or he's clear that they're going to go to counseling without you. The data's clear too. If you choose not to go to counseling with your spouse, your worst fears might actually be coming true.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah. I try and speak as directly or...
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how does that finally click in their heads?
Not always, but I'd say the majority of time.
Okay.
Yeah. Because whatever they've got going on, whether that's anger or fear or frustration, or maybe it's even disappointment because they had a horrible counselor before, and it didn't go well.
And that happens.
It does happen. Absolutely, it happens.
Of course.
So all of that, but what they're doing is they're stonewalling in that moment. And what I want to know as a counselor is why. Why are you stonewalling counseling? Because we can have a conversation about that. If you had a bad experience with a counselor, let's talk about it. If you're afraid that you're going to go into counseling and get blamed for a whole bunch of stuff that's not your fault, let's talk about that. Let's open that up. If you're fearful of rejection, or there's a whole multitude of reasons of why people don't want to go to counseling, but the statistics on that don't lie. If you put that on the back burner and your spouse goes to counseling without you, you're biting yourself in the butt.
Man.
You're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, how about there's got to be a bright side.
There is
right?
a bright side.
So when this works,
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe.
So
This is true.
where are we going from here?
Yeah.
Where do we land? What keeps people going? What's the hopeful thing that keeps people going?
Yeah. So just to recap, like rest is going to look different, because when rest is okay to have. Like it's okay to give some space and create a safe place, and then boundaries look different too. Versus like when you have boundaries with other family members, boundaries with a spouse are going to look different. They need to be. You need to wear love.
Mm-hmm.
That's that Colossians 3 says, like, you need to approach it with compassion and kindness and humility. And then the number one thing, certainly last, but certainly not least, is there's still hope. The biggest threat to your marriage is not fighting. It is apathy. If you are feeling apathetic about your marriage, you need to call a counselor tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think did we talk about this on the podcast? I
It's
don't know
very
if this was on the
possible.
podcast.
I talk about it a lot. So
I said that at some point. Maybe it was just to Lindsay. And I was like, but it wasn't about her and I. It was just in general, like with relationships and conflict.
Yeah.
I was like, don't ever be worried if I'm fighting. Be worried when I am silent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's true.
That's with a lot of mental health issues too. When
Mhm.
people just quit talking, that's a whole nother podcast. So
Yeah. So there's hope, right? If you're fighting like cats and dogs, that means you still care. And one of the best things that a really good counselor will do is reframe that for you, just like I just did, and instill a sense of hope and relieve some of that anxiety. Not just some of it, not all of it. There's still a lot to be unpacked there. But instilling a sense of hope for that couple is paramount to giving them the energy to move forward into the difficult conversations ahead. So what I would land that plane is there's still hope. There's always hope. There's always hope. And it's like, I know I quote Lord of the Rings too much, but that's what Gandalf says to Frodo, right?
yeah, and I think
I don't know. Does he say that?
Yeah.
I haven't read. Is that in the movies?
Yes, it is in the movies. Yeah,
missed
when
that
they are in the mines of Moria.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, let
yeah.
me pastorally interject.
Yeah,
here.
hit it.
We have to remember that marriage wasn't a good idea; it was God's idea.
Ooh,
And,
that'll preach.
and when we look at Colossians, but above all, put on Christ,
Mhm.
put on love. And so always remember that the power that God put within you can carry you. And that, with the help of a counselor, through lots of prayer, get back to the basics of what the scripture says, to honor one another, to submit to one another, husbands to love your wife like Christ loved the church and
Ephesians 5.
and died for, and so don't forget those things. It's interesting. It's like we we always forget. We default to the negative things and forget the positive things.
Which is that negative sentiment override. If we go back to that data,
Right.
the science part of it,
Yeah.
that's the negative sentiment override.
Yeah.
Well, that's just factual in our brains too. And it's like a 1 to 9 or whatever ratio that you could hear 9 things and 1 negative, and you only pay attention to the 1 negative,
Right.
or, they may be equal at that
Yeah.
point,
Yeah. So, to that point, Doug, like, we have to discipline ourselves to see the good,
Mm-hmm.
to be thankful for it. And that's not just in your marriage. I mean, that's in life,
Yeah.
right? But it definitely applies in your marriage. Of, if I'm in negative sentiment override, that means I'm not believing the best of my spouse. So then I have to discipline my brain, change my brain, right, in order to to build those positive connections and see the best in who they are and empathize with them and connect with them, even though it may hurt.
Yeah. That's really fascinating. Like, I think I did some of this like in junior high, maybe early high school, high school, college, right around then. Because I was super negative, like probably depressed, all this stuff. And then I like just decided I was really tired of it and decided I wanted to be optimistic and happy and whatever. And I just started finding all the cheesiest happy music and started listening to that. I mean, I did everything to just drown myself and be happy and look for the silver lining like everywhere. And it worked for a lot of years, and then who knows what happened.
Hey, Cary, I know are we getting close to close? Why don't you read that passage again?
Man.
And when you listen to it, think about the action steps. We put this stuff on. It just doesn't happen. We have to put it on.
Yeah. So, all right, Colossians 3, 12 through 14. So, chosen by God for this new life of love, dress in the wardrobe God picked out for you: compassion, kindness, humility, quiet strength, and discipline. Be even-tempered, content with second place, quick to forgive an offense, forgive as quickly and completely as the Master forgave you, and regardless of what else you put on, wear love. It's your basic, all-purpose garment. Never be without it. Yeah.
That's great.
I love that. What is an all-purpose garment that would be like a modern day? Like, I think of my Columbia jacket. I don't know why.
Or just jeans.
Oh, yeah. Jeans.
Yeah.
Put on your jeans. Never be without them.
That's good.
Good stuff.
I don't think we can add much more to that. So
No, I agree.
yeah, that's a good note to end on.
Yes. Okay, I hear you guys speaking. It's a time to end the podcast. Join us next time for our next episode. We're going to be talking. We're definitely going to be talking more about family dysfunction, because that's a series that we're doing. And we're going to be talking about parents and dysfunctional kids. So tune in next time for that. Send questions, prayer requests, and encouragement to feedback@relaxedandfree.com. And make sure to go and review us on Apple Podcast or Spotify or Google or YouTube.
Anywhere you can get it.
Anywhere you can get it. And make sure to comment and leave comments and all those things. And we really, really, really do appreciate that. It helps us to bring this podcast to you. We love you, our loyal listeners. Until next time, rejoice in hope, endure in suffering, and persist in prayer. Much love. At Lakewood Family Therapy, we aim to be your refuge in the storm. We're professional Christian counselors whose sole purpose is to bring healing to your family and hope for the future. If you'd like a free 15-minute phone consultation with one of our professional counselors, you can call or text 816-663-9751, or head on over to our website, lwfamilytherapy.com. We'd love to hear from you. Lakewood Family Therapy, where faith, family, and future is our number one priority.
Relaxed and Free is a presentation of Lakewood Family Therapy. Catch up on other episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and please rate and review. Every review honestly helps us bring you this content. Production and engineering led by Doug Bonebrake. Recording done by Chris Renfro. Stay relaxed and free.
Let's not waste time, or take this slow. We've got miles behind us, but miles to go. So let's just break this down to the simplest truth. You and I as one will always be better than two. again.